I don't see very many people talking about the Lush perfumes, the actual kind of black label, more niche, more expensive perfumes from Lush. I think personally that they're quite an interesting house. I mean, I would say you can normally tell if something's from Lush. So it's if you like Lush, then you'll probably like a lot of these perfumes. If you are not a Lushy, you probably won't. You have to kind of appreciate a more natural smelling perfume, something that has a bit more of an essential oil vibe. But I think generally I wanted to just do some more reviews of the actual Lush perfumes because I do think some of them are so beautiful and I don't really hear many people talk about them. Ouch, 110. He is a fantastic perfume reviewer here on YouTube. He has amazing videos on Lush perfumes. He used to work in Lush, so I highly recommend you go and checking out his reviews as well. But there's definitely some perfumes that I'm really fond of or I wanted to know about that I just couldn't really find much information about. And for Grantica reviews, they tend to be a bit interesting, partly because the notes on there often don't in any way, well, sometimes they're just straight up not correct, and other times they just don't really represent what the perfume smells like. And a lot of the reviews obviously are by people who just don't really appreciate a more natural smell. And if you only wear quite sweet and quite crowd pleasing designer perfumes, the chances are you won't like Lush perfumes, or at least not at first. So I just wanted to do a few videos. So this is going to be two-parter on the black label, which are the more expensive perfumes, and then I'll have a video on the white label standard perfumes, and then I'll have one on the body sprays as well, because I have a fair collection of Lush. I've been, over the last year or so, I've been testing them in store on my skin, making notes. I literally, for the first time ever on this channel, have printed out notes here of what I think of the perfumes. So I will start off though with a bit of disclaimer. So I don't think there are many of their perfumes that I liked upon first spray. So Lush use pretty natural ingredients, and if you want to know what their perfumes actually smell like, you need to look at what's listed under ingredients. And I find that's a much more accurate way to decipher what the smell will actually smell like, because the notes that they highlight often don't represent their perfumes very well. Fragranticas often way off note wise, and if you see something that piques your interest, there's not really much point in sniffing them in store. So for one thing, Lush shops are so overpoweringly perfumed that you just can't get an idea of what the perfumes really smell like while you're in that store, and nor can you tell from a card very well if you spray it on a card. It's definitely better on a card. That's definitely better than just smelling in store. But I really think they need to go on skin. So I would say you really need to spray them on your skin. You need to give them a few minutes to let them develop before you can work out if you like them. And often, sometimes it's more than a few minutes. Sometimes it's like 20 minutes before you really get the smell that you're going to have for the rest of the day. The dry down is where the real scent is, I think, for these perfumes. They tend to smell like green or bitter or just like full on essential oils or smoky or crazy woody. But if you give them time, they morph into often extremely magical perfumes. Now, they do also have a very specific Lush smell, most of these perfumes. I think if I smelt someone wearing these, I would, if I really thought about it, I'd probably think, oh, I bet that's a Lush perfume, because Lush does have a certain house DNA, because they love ylang ylang, they love jasmine, they love rose, and I find that their jasmine is really recognisable, their rose is really recognisable, their ylang ylang is quite banana-y. I love their ylang ylang. So the other thing I want to say is that, so for instance, tonka comes from coumarin, and it varies in its sweetness levels depending, I think, on, I'm not sure if it's to do with the age or how long you've roasted it or how much you use, but they often list it as coumarin, sometimes it's listed as tonka, but just for the ease, I'm just always going to call it tonka because it does give the same kind of feel, and I'll just mention whether it's particularly sweet or not, and I'll also use the scent profiles of the notes rather than the compound names, because I think that helps to describe the fragrances much better. So let's get going. So the first one is 1000 Kisses Deep. Now this is £55 for 100 mils. The other thing to say about the black label is that unfortunately they don't do smaller bottles than 100 mils. I find that really frustrating. I'd like them to do at least 30 ml bottle options of these, and I would definitely like them also to do like either pen sprays or the little tiny 15 mils, because these perfumes don't have the longest sell by date, but they are, you know, they last longer. I mean, I'm just not going to lie. They did definitely last longer than it says on the sell by date, because I've got an old perfume from Lush that I've had for maybe, I don't know, maybe like 10 years and it still smells great. But yeah, I mean, I don't need 100 mils of probably any of these bottles. And luckily for me, in order to do this review, I managed to get a bundle on eBay from a fabulous woman who sold them to me for an incredibly affordable price, because otherwise I would not have been able to do these reviews for you, because or I'd just have to use a picture, but because all the bottles are the same, it would have been, you know, I wouldn't have been able to show you the actual bottles, just because they'd be prohibitively expensive for me. But yeah, Lush, unfortunately at the moment it's 100 mils or nothing. So let's start with 1000 Kisses Deep. So this is 55 mils, £55 for 100 mils. This is one of the more affordable ones. So this one is Osmanthus, Mandarin, Myrrh and Resin. This one is all right till 2026. You can see they have the ingredients on the back. Beautiful colour of this juice. Just really simple bottles. They're thick, they're nice. Just a basic metal lid. So this is one of the ones that I fell in love with a while back. I do actually have a partial bottle of this already, but this came in the bundle, so I can show you the lovely neat version. So 1000 Kisses Deep is Osmanthus, Mandarin, Myrrh and Resins. It also has labdamen, and there's something very magical and very comforting about this perfume. I find that there's something that's like related to Karma here, which makes me quite happy, because Karma, I love that perfume, but I cannot wear it because of the patchouli. And where Karma's bright and effervescent, it smells a bit like an orange cola. Well, specifically an orange cola being drunk by a clean hippie who's wearing patchouli oil. I think that's what that smells like. 1000 Kisses is kind of soft, fluffy, it's resinous and fruity, and it has a hint of something blossomy in there because of that osmanthus. But the labdamen gives it a slight leathery edge that comes across a tiny bit, to me, like mothballs. I know that's going to sound horrible, but it definitely, to me, has this kind of slightly odd mothball-y smell. But I also weirdly find it very soothing and comforting. And I think that's because it kind of just gives me the feel of opening an old wooden wardrobe and taking out like my grandmother's like faux fur or something that still has her chypre perfume sprayed all over it. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's kind of the vibe I get from it. The mandarin in this is very, very juicy and strong when you first spray it. It chills out when it dries down, but you never quite lose that slight citrusy mandarin smell. And obviously the osmanthus helps with that because it's kind of apricot-y smell. But I think this one is really pretty, but it's definitely one you'd want to spray on your skin. All of these are. You definitely want to test it. Blind buying it would be a real risk, unless of course you get it from eBay, in which case I think, you know, you're pretty safe to get things from eBay because you can probably sell them on, as I will with any of these that I don't want to keep. So I'm going for this one next, because I feel like they're slight relatives of each other in a way, Love and 1000 Kisses Deep. Love is £85 for 100 ml, so you're a little bit more expensive with this one. So I think there's a real citrusy, lovely smell here again. It gets much better as it dries down. This one, where 1000 Kisses is a little bit like a kind of orangey, mandarin-y, soft, florally, resiny smell. Love is like an apple, cinnamony kind of floral, slightly resiny smell. Maybe more resin, is that really the right word to use for it? Probably not. This one It has apple in it. It has ylang ylang. It has jasmine, lemongrass. So the lemongrass is quite noticeable here. So in my notes I've said it's got something very similar to 1000 Kisses Deep, and is kind of a sister to Cocktail. Now I will talk about Cocktail another time, but it's sharper than 1000 Kisses. It's not quite as soothing because it's a bit more bright. But it shares a little bit of that kind of mothbally scent, but nowhere near as strong as 1000 Kisses. But it has got that slight kept in a cupboard kind of smell about it. These are all new, so these are the most recent kind of formulations, so there's nothing wrong with it. But the more it dries down, the more you get that appley vibe coming through. There's lemongrass, there's cinnamon. In the beginning, it gives it a medicinal vibe that isn't great, but then when it dries down, you get the florals, and that's the bit that I think smells a bit like the Lush Perfume Cocktail, because the florals in that are ylang ylang and jasmine. And I think there might be rose in that one as well, yeah. And those are the same. I mean, like I said, Lush love to use those florals. I think they come up in a lot of things. I would say jasmine is a little bit more dominant than the rose and the ylang here, but they've been mixed up really nice, and it's still quite comforting. It smells kind of Christmassy. So I'd say it takes about 20 minutes for this one to develop its real smell, which is that kind of floral, apple, cinnamony smell. It's quite fluffy, but it keeps that kind of tanginess from the lemongrass and the apple. So this is an interesting perfume. I think it might be actually, when it dries down, quite an easy one to wear compared to some of the others. So I think it's really pretty. 85 for 100ml, also not too bad. Again, I mean, you don't really need to spray a huge amount of these, if I'm being honest. I think probably you can get away with just a little bit. I mean, my general feeling about Lush perfumes is they do last for a fair bit of time, but I don't find any of these like horribly strong. And I think sometimes I read reviews and it says that these are really strong, and I'm quite fussy about strong perfumes, but I don't find these hugely strong. So the next one up is this is a slightly tricky one for me because it's a bit of a love and hate. This is Dad's Garden. So Dad's Garden, lovely, slightly lighter colour than the others. And there are two versions of Dad's Garden. So you can get Dad's Garden, which is the body spray, and then you can get this one, which is the perfume, and this is chamomile and honeysuckle, or honeysuckle and chamomile. So Dad's Garden is £100 for 100ml. Now, if you think about that as being £1 per ml, it's not a massive amount of money compared to some of the designer perfumes or some of the niche perfumes that are like £300. But this one is very floral, quite natural smelling. There is absolutely a pea smell here from that chamomile. It does die down, but I can see that would massively bother people. And it is a bit of a bummer because that is just a natural thing with like the natural chamomile essential oil type smell. There is just a bit of a pea smell to it. It doesn't, yeah, it's a little bit of a bummer really, that. Because the actual natural floral scent underneath this smells like a warm spring day. It is so comforting because of that chamomile. There's also lavender in it. There's jasmine and orange flower here, but it's not enough that it bothers me. And there's a little bit of tonka to keep it sweet, but it's like that beautiful, sweet, natural garden floral smell. It's like a lovely, pretty, perfectly sweet, but not too sweet honeysuckle kind of smell with the green leaves in the garden. And I rarely come across floral perfumes that actually evoke the scent of flowers blooming on trees and bushes without loads of interference from other like super not garden-like notes, if that makes sense, like huge amounts of vanilla or like just tons of patchouli or just really sugary things or marshmallows, you know, that kind of thing. So I think this one's got something really special about it, and I do think it's worth the money. You know, again, I wish they would offer this in smaller bottles, but, you know, they don't. It's... the pea smell definitely calms down. It definitely does. But it's definitely there at the beginning. And I think, again, you would definitely have to smell this in the shop to see whether you can cope with it, because I'm sort of on the fence right now as to how I feel about this. Because I kind of love it, but I really struggle with that pea smell. But, you know, that's life for you. You can't always be absolutely perfect. So, there we go. Next one. Okay, let's go for Goddess. This is such a surprise to me, this perfume, because I was sure I would absolutely hate Goddess. Goddess is... the reviews on this vary very wildly on what it smells like. This is a very expensive one. Well, it's one of the more expensive ones anyway. It's £125 for 100 mils. That is because there's oud in this one. So, as I said, the prices will be dependent on what the ingredients are. So, the Lush perfumes that are cheaper, generally speaking, have cheaper ingredients. The ones that are more expensive, generally speaking, have more expensive ingredients. And real oud is really expensive, which is why so many perfumes that say they have oud in are actually just a synthetic oud, because actual oud is really expensive. So, £125 for Goddess. This is listed on the Lush website as oud, jasmine and osmanthus. It also has rose, sandalwood, citrus, balsams and resinous notes. This is like a warm, floral, resinous, slightly smoky, but also very tangy, citrusy perfume with a bit of spice. Because everyone says this is like either overwhelmed by the jasmine or overwhelmed by the oud, I thought I would hate it. But on my skin, it's actually kind of beautiful. There is, like, when you first spray it, there's like a really fizzy smell to this. It's weird. So the opening's like almost like a fizzy drink or something, and the osmanthus comes across like apricot. I'd say that the addition of the rose oil stops the jasmine from becoming like too dominating within these florals. And surprisingly, when it dries down, the oud is not at all overwhelming. It's kept at bay by all these other notes. It's ever so slightly powdery, but it never kind of loses that almost fizzy drink kind of smell. Slightly citrusy. It's really unusual. It's really unusual. If you like the Goddess products, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to like the perfume. I find that with a few things, because in a bath bomb or something, it has quite a different vibe than if you're actually wearing it as a perfume. But I was absolutely sure I would dislike Goddess so much, and I really do not dislike it. I think it's beautiful. I don't need a massive bottle of it. It might be the same with a lot of these. I might take a decant and then sell them on to people who really actually want to wear them all the time. But I do think that Goddess is quite an interesting perfume. It's unusual, it's pretty, it's got a zesty kind of bright, fun vibe to it, which I wasn't expecting from a jasmine-y oud perfume, but that osmanthus is so fruity. So yeah, that one's really, really interesting. I just was sure I would absolutely hate it. Then, okay, last up in this batch, we have The Smell of Freedom. Now, this is my favourite from this batch, and again, I am amazed. Smelling it from the bottle, I'm like, ugh, no. And again, I find that with a lot of the Lush perfumes. I often find that I don't like them when I smell them in store or from the bottle. But on your skin, this takes a real turn. On the card, it retains a little bit more of what I can smell from the bottle, but on my skin, again, chemistry might not be the same for everyone. But So like I said, I wasn't expecting to like it, and at first but it's so weird. At first when I sprayed this on my skin, it made me think of chocolate oranges, which is obviously like quite a strange thing to come from a perfume when you hear the notes here. So it's described as orris, oud and sandalwood on the Lush site, but there is a big dose of lemongrass in this. There's citruses, there's jasmine and neroli, neither of which I normally like, may I add. There's a smooth and sweet dry down though, and it smells a bit like Christmas because there's also like cinnamon. Well, there's a cinnamol, which has a cinnamony smell, and anise. It's got a really perfectly little amount of the classic Lush jasmine. It just sort of hints at its presence, but I don't find it overpowering. And I really struggle with jasmine. If you're only watching this because you wanted to know about the Lush perfumes and you've never seen my videos before, I really can't wear jasmine a lot of the time because I find it gives me a headache. It's just something about jasmine in perfumes that I love the smell of it in nature, but in perfumes it really isn't for me. But it's not hugely strong here, I think, and I think maybe that's because again they've got the geraniol, which is a compound that smells like geranium and a soft rose, and it's in so many of the Lush perfumes. It also has a bit of tonka that sweetens it up, and it's just so sweet and fluffy. It's so comforting. This one I think smells in the dry down a little bit less like the general kind of Lush vibe. I mean, again, you can still kind of tell it's a Lush perfume, but it doesn't really smell like these other ones. It's so soft and comfortable and pretty. I mean, I think I'm probably moving into the wrong time of year for it. I think this will be one that I will really like oh my goodness, in autumn it's going to be amazing. And I have to say, I don't find the oud overpowering this at all. Like when you first spray it, yeah, it's like mega strong. Same with all, again, I say again, Lush perfumes are crazy strong when you first spray them. They are really a bit harsh or too natural smelling. You don't get any of that soft, sweet fluffiness in any of them until they dry down. So, yeah, I don't know. There's something about that lemongrass with the kind of cinnamony and anisey kind of slight vibe mixed with that smoky oud that just makes me think of Christmas. And I like I said, I can sense a little bit of the jasmine. If you know what Lust from Lush smells like, that is the classic Lush jasmine. And obviously, depending on how big a dose you've got of it in the perfume, I mean, I can absolutely recognise it in this. I can't wear that perfume, but I think it's absolutely stunning. The oud is not overpowering here, and I would say like it's almost like an oud gateway perfume. It's like it has a bit of oud, but it's not crazy strong. It's not horribly woody. And again, I don't like synthetic woody smells most of the time. I am a sandalwood girl and I like a soft, creamy sandalwood. I don't want to smell like a table. I don't want to smell like a tree. There's a certain synthetic wood that I think smells like creosote, like tar. And I can't be getting on board with any of that. But a very small dose of natural oud, as it turns out, I am enjoying in both Goddess and Smell of Freedom. I think that Lush have used oud in a really gentle way. I don't find this dirty. I don't find it strong. I find it delicate, and I'm just amazed at how much I like this one, because this is one in the bundle that I was like, I mean, I'd like to smell it, but I don't know. I hadn't tested this. I'd tested these in the actual Lush. I hadn't tested either of these because of the reviews of them on Fragrantica, and I just couldn't be more excited about the fact that they're also really good. Smell of Freedom is probably my favourite, and I can't believe I'm saying that. Perfectly unisex. I think all of these are easy to wear by men or women and anyone in between, I think it's just really pretty perfumes with a really natural vibe. Most of them dry down into something that's really soft and just so not aggressive. They all smell aggressive when you first spray them. They don't smell aggressive once they dry down. So I would say these are really magical. And then I'm just going to fill you in while you can look at these lovely bottles about some of the ones I don't have. So let's have a look at my notes. So I've also tested, and I've tested all of these on my skin in a Lush store, and then I've kind of come home, I've had a real smell of them to see how I feel. So Frangipani, that one is £70 for 100ml. That to me is a very green and bitter floral when you first spray it. The dry down has a very smoky guaiac wood in it, which I'm not keen on. That one to me is more woody than either of the oud perfumes here. And it also has almond oil in it that I find is very, very sweet. So when the base kicks in there, the florals, which are Frangipani and tuberose, feel a little bit overwhelmed by the sweetness of the almond oil and the smokiness of that wood. So personally, I don't like that one. I actually find it slightly sickly when it dries down. But I mean, I think that's one that if you like a kind of smoky wood and you like a sweet almond and frangipani kind of smell, I don't get a huge amount of tuberose in that, to be honest. Yeah, that one just isn't for me. It's not really my favourite at all. I didn't really enjoy wearing that one. And then we have Flowers Barrow, which is £100 for 100ml. And my notes here say a slightly sickly floral. It's slightly reminiscent of the opening to Keep It Fluffy, which is one I'll talk about in another video. In that it smells a little bit like a Lush shop. So some of the perfumes, they, you know, like I said, they have that kind of house DNA generally that you can tell it's a Lush perfume. But a few of their perfumes, for instance, like I said, Keep It Fluffy, but also one that I absolutely adore and is probably one of their most popular, which is American Cream. They smell like a Lush shop, you know. When you first spray them, they absolutely just smell like the inside of a Lush shop. There is actually a perfume called 29 High Street, I think, which is supposed to smell literally like the inside of the first Lush shop. So if I ever get my hands on that, I'll be able to do a review on it. But Flowers Barrow, this is like geranium, and it's that classic Lush rose, but it has a very syrupy blackcurrant, and I feel like it doesn't mix particularly well. It's got neroli in it as well, and chamomile, so it is quite floral, but it gets increasingly sweet as it dries down. And I just, yeah, again, I find that blackcurrant just a little bit sickly. So I can't get on with that myself. It's just a little bit, it's too much for me, really. Fragrantica lists sage and thyme, but Lush doesn't have those ingredients or any compounds, I think, that match those scents. So I think that they've actually got it wrong there. I think it's very much, Flowers Barrow is very much a sweet blackcurrant and flowers smell. But yeah, I can't really get along with that one. It doesn't work for me. So then the last one I'm just going to talk about is Cardamom Coffee. So Cardamom Coffee, that one is £150 for 100ml. That's the most expensive one on my list that I've smelt. So Cardamom Coffee, I think it's a fabulously realistic coffee. It's got an aromatic vibe from the cardamom. I think it has a nice level of sweetness. Cocoa Absolute, which I think is actually coffee. And then, because it definitely doesn't smell like there's chocolate in this, I think it's actually coffee. On the Lush website, it says Cocoa Absolute, and then on Fragrantica it says coffee, but this smells like coffee to me, not cocoa. So it's also got rose, it's got olive leaf, and it's got oud. So this time the oud is quite strong. So it really, really comes forward in the dry down, and it becomes just a little bit too woody for me. It still smells clean. So it's got like a really nice black coffee in it, and it's got a nice level of sweetness, but that oud is just a bit too much for me in that particular perfume. I think in terms of coffee perfumes, it's one of the most interesting that I've smelt. I have another perfume from Lush that I'll talk about in part 2 that also has a coffee note, and you can recognise it as the same kind of note. It smells like a dash of of almost espresso, actually. It's that coffee, like, it's quite pungent but in a good way. It's a nice clean coffee, but again, the oud there just takes it a little bit too far into the woodiness. And I also, with coffee, I don't necessarily like it to be too sweet, so I think if you like coffee perfumes, I think Cardamom Coffee is really interesting. It smells really niche. It's not sickly sweet, but it has a really nice sweetness to it. Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful perfume, to be honest. If you like that one, then you are going to smell just totally fabulous, I think. But yeah, so that's my part 1. I probably waffled on a bit, but I'm just kind of excited about talking about these perfumes. These are technically, although I've never paid full price for any of these black labels, I always get them on eBay. Always. I'd happily spend like £50 on them, but because I have so many perfumes, I don't need such big bottles, so spending £125 on a Lush perfume is a bit crazy for me. But it's always worth checking eBay, because people tend not to get through these too quickly, so you can often get these for really good prices. But yeah, I mean, I'd really love to hear anyone's thoughts on these, if you have them already, or if you have tried them in store, or if you just want to get them, because I think they're really interesting perfumes. And thank you so much to the fabulous lady who sold these to me, because she's just really made this video possible, and she's obviously wonderful for selling me these lovely perfumes. Yeah, let me know what you think down below.